As we've been reporting, the Senate voted to advance a resolution that could limit President Trump's ability to continue military action in Venezuela without congressional approval. It comes as the president told the New York Times in a wide-ranging interview that he could see the U.S. having direct oversight of Venezuela for years. For more, CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins me. Charlie, what would it take militarily for the U.S. to run Venezuela for more than a year?
Lindsay, it would take a lot, and it really depends on the situation in Venezuela when those troops are sent in there and what their responsibility would be. So if you were to compare it to, say, Panama, right, the invasion of Panama, they had a population of 4.6 million. Those are 27,000 U.S. soldiers that went in there in addition to the 10,000 or so that were already there. Venezuela has a population of 28 million, and it's larger in size by compared to Iraq.
This just happened on the floor of the United States Senate. We are looking at a specific moment in time that changes the trajectory of this administration. A massive rupture has occurred within the government. For the first time in this presidency, the wall of political protection around the executive branch has cracked. Senators from both parties just moved to strip the president of his war powers regarding the conflict in Venezuela. This is the most serious internal political confrontation we have seen in decades. It is not just a debate, it is a constitutional crisis that is unfolding right now. The president has refused to answer basic questions about the invasion. He has refused to explain his legal authority. In response, the legislative branch attempted to assert control over the military. This creates a dangerous standoff between the commander-in-chief and the body that funds the government. The stakes are the survival of institutional checks and balances. If you are watching this, you are witnessing a historic test of the American system.
During the surge. But again, you are talking about dealing with an insurgency there. And that's one of the unknowns when it comes to Venezuela, because there are groups called the colectivos, which are armed civilian groups. They're already operating there. There are government forces in there, FARC, Colombian rebels just across the border who might go in and fill that vacuum, and of course the cartels. So there's any number of moving parts that the U.S. military would have to address, especially if there are going to be U.S. citizens going in there, as the Trump administration has sort of suggested in investing in the oil industry there. So it's a sliding rule. And I can tell you, they don't have the number of forces there now. They've got plenty of warships at sea. They've got the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, plenty of air power, but nowhere near the amount of land forces they would need if they were to.
We need to go through exactly what took place because the details are critical. The Senate voted to advance a resolution. This resolution was designed to stop the president from continuing military action in Venezuela without explicit approval from Congress. This vote happened immediately after the president gave an interview to the New York Times. In that interview, he said he could see America maintaining direct oversight of Venezuela for years. He committed the country to a long-term occupation. He did this without asking Congress and without explaining the plan to the public. The military reality on the ground is very difficult. Experts are looking at the logistics of running a country like Venezuela. It is not a simple operation. If you compare this situation to the invasion of Panama, the differences are massive. When America invaded Panama, that country had a population of about 4.6 million people. America sent in 2,700 soldiers to add to the 1,000 already there. Venezuela is completely different. It has a population of 28 million people. It is much larger geographically. It is larger than Iraq. To control a country of that size, the military requirement is enormous. America does not currently have the number of land forces in the region to control a country the size of Venezuela. There are warships at sea. There is the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. There is plenty of air power. But air power does not run a government. Air power does not police streets. To do what the president is suggesting, you would need a massive ground force. This is not just about the Venezuelan army. There are other armed groups involved. There are civilian groups known as colectivos that are armed and loyal to the old regime. There are illicit narcotics networks. There are rebel groups from Colombia that operate across the border. There is a power vacuum that these groups will try to fill. The president is talking about investing in the oil industry there, which means sending American citizens into this volatile environment. The military would have to protect those citizens. This is a sliding scale of commitment that grows larger every day. Something extraordinary happened in the Senate because of this. Donald Trump is reacting with fear to what the Senate did. Senators from both parties joined together. Republicans and Democrats voted to rein in this unauthorized war. They used a rare bipartisan war powers resolution. The goal was to stop him from launching any further military action unless he gets permission. The vote was 52 to 47. 5 Republicans broke ranks. They joined every single Democrat. This is a major signal. 5 members of the president's own party looked at the invasion, the capture of the foreign leader, and the plan to run the country, and they said it went too far. They said this is not what the Constitution allows. The president refused to answer questions about this. When reporters asked him to explain his legal authority, he did not answer. When senators demanded to know why he bypassed Congress, he stonewalled them. When he was pressed on why, he pushed aside the Venezuelan opposition that America had previously recognized. He would not respond. Instead of answering, he attacked the Republicans who voted against him. He accused Congress of trying to take away powers to defend America. The questions he is refusing to answer are not complicated. They are the basic questions of oversight. Why did you launch a military strike without authorization? What legal authority did you believe you had? Why did you choose not to back the political opposition that Washington recognized as the legitimate winners of the election? What is the endgame for occupying another country? What happens to the people there while America runs their government? Any president acting in good faith would have answers to these questions. Trump will not engage. He will not explain himself. He will not submit to the accountability that the system requires. This refusal is causing anger in the Senate. It is strengthening the argument that his power needs to be checked. His actual explanation for ignoring Congress is that Congress leaks information. He told reporters he deliberately chose not to inform the legislative branch because he believes they leak. That is his justification for ignoring the law. He invaded a country, captured a leader, and announced a multi-year occupation without telling anyone because he does not trust Congress with information. When senators said that is not how the system works, he attacked them as disloyal. He treated a constitutional check as a personal betrayal. This is a fundamental clash. It is a battle between a president who believes he is above accountability and a Congress that is finally pushing back. The war powers vote was dramatic. There were speeches on the floor. There were procedural maneuvers. There was intense pressure from the White House to keep Republicans in line. The war powers resolution of 1973 was designed for exactly this moment. It was passed after the Vietnam War. It was created to prevent presidents from dragging the country into unauthorized conflicts. It gives Congress the authority to check presidential war-making. The resolution in the Senate was an exercise of that authority. It said that if the president wants to keep forces in Venezuela, he must come to Congress. That is not a radical idea. That is Article 1 of the Constitution. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. The president is the commander-in-chief, but he is not supposed to commit forces to hostilities without approval. The fact that 5 Republicans joined this effort is remarkable. Republican senators usually hesitate to check a president from their own party on national security. They usually defer to the executive branch. They worry about looking weak. But this time, they said no. Rand Paul was one of them, which is expected, but there were others who are not usually anti-war. They looked at the capture of Maduro and the announcement of American control, and they decided it was too much. The president's response was furious. He lobbied them personally. He threatened political retaliation. He made it clear that supporting this resolution was a betrayal. Under that intense pressure, 2 Republicans who voted yes on the first vote eventually flipped. The final vote defeated the resolution. But the event was still significant. It showed that there is bipartisan concern. It showed that the president's control over his party is not absolute. It showed that the constitutional fight is real. The president is also stonewalling on the political strategy. For years, American policy was to support the opposition leader Juan Guaido. We recognized him as the legitimate leader. We imposed sanctions to help him. Now, the president has captured Maduro, but he has sidelined the opposition we supported. He will not explain why. He will not say who is supposed to run Venezuela. He just boasts that America will oversee the country and control the oil revenue. That is not a strategy. That is a vague assertion of dominance. He is ducking the questions that matter most. We do not know the costs. We do not know the humanitarian impact. We do not know the legal justification. He treats these questions as illegitimate. He does not think Congress has the right to ask them. This fits a pattern. He has always responded this way when accountability becomes real. He invokes the Fifth Amendment in civil trials. He claims he cannot recall facts in depositions. He attacks investigations as witch hunts. Now he is doing the same thing with war powers. He runs, he attacks, and he deflects. He refuses to answer because the answers would reveal that he never had a legitimate justification in the first place. We need to analyze why this specific event matters so much in the broader context of political power in history. This is not just about Venezuela. This is about the breaking point of institutions. When 5 members of a president's own party cross the aisle on a war vote, it signals a shift in the fear dynamic. Political parties operate on loyalty and fear. Senators usually stay in line because they fear the president's ability to destroy their careers. When that fear is no longer enough to hold the line, the power structure begins to shake. The fact that they crossed the line, even if some flipped back later, proves that the president's grip is slipping. We must look at the historical parallel here. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 was mentioned in the report. That law exists because of Richard Nixon and the Vietnam War. At that time, Congress realized that the executive branch had accumulated too much power to start and sustain wars without the people's consent. We are seeing a direct echo of that era today. The Senate is attempting to use the same tool they forged in the 1970s to restrain a president who is acting unilaterally. The difference today is the brazen nature of the refusal. Nixon operated in the shadows. This president is announcing his refusal to answer questions openly to the press. He is stating that his reason for bypassing the Constitution is his personal distrust of Congress. This elevates the conflict from a policy dispute to a structural crisis. The comparison to Panama is also vital for understanding the danger. The invasion of Panama in 1989 was a quick operation to remove a dictator, Manuel Noriega. It was popular and fast. The president seems to think he has replicated that in Venezuela by capturing Maduro, but the analysis shows this is a false comparison. Venezuela is not Panama. It is a massive, complex nation with a deep history of anti-American sentiment and armed insurgency. By treating Venezuela like Panama, the administration is walking into a trap. They are committing to an occupation they do not have the troops for. This disconnect between the president's confidence and the military reality is where the danger lies. History shows that when leaders confuse a quick tactical win with a long-term strategic victory, they end up in quagmires that last for years. We also need to analyze the meaning of silence. In a democracy, the legitimacy of a war comes from the explanation given to the people. When a leader refuses to explain the legal authority or the endgame, they are stripping the action of its democratic legitimacy. Silence is a power move, but it is also a sign of weakness. It suggests that the true reasons for the action cannot be spoken aloud. It suggests that there is no legal memo that justifies this. If there were a solid legal argument, the White House would be reading it on television every hour. The refusal to answer tells us that the action was likely impulsive and illegal. The institutional clash here is between the sword and the purse. The president holds the sword, he commands the military. Congress holds the purse, they control the money. The vote we just saw was Congress reaching for the purse strings. Even though the final vote failed, the threat was made. This changes the calculation for the White House. They now know that they cannot assume endless funding for an endless occupation. The immune system of the republic is trying to kick in. The legislative branch is waking up from a long slumber. This creates friction. Friction in government is usually good. It prevents tyranny. But friction during a military operation can be chaotic. We are entering a period where the government is fighting itself while trying to run a foreign country. We must look at the consequences of this rupture. In the short term, the failure of the resolution does not mean the end of the conflict. The president will likely try to purge the voices of dissent within his party. He views the 5 senators who voted against him as traitors. We can expect him to support primary challengers against them or cut off their access to the White House. This will deepen the divide in the party. The Republican Party is splitting into 2 camps, those loyal to the Constitution and those loyal to the man. This split will make it harder for the president to pass any other legislation. The immediate consequence for the military operation is confusion. The generals and commanders now know that political support for this mission is thin. They know that Congress is watching closely. This often leads to caution on the ground. Military leaders do not like to commit to long-term objectives when the political foundation is crumbling at home. We might see the military leadership try to narrow the scope of the mission to avoid the years of oversight the president promised. They will try to avoid the quagmire because they know Congress will not fund it forever. In the long term, if this precedent stands, it changes the presidency permanently. If a president can invade a major country, capture its leader, and set up a new government without Congress and suffer no consequences, then the War Powers Clause of the Constitution is effectively dead. It means we have moved to a system where one person decides on war and peace. The War Powers Resolution was meant to stop this, but if it cannot pass, even in this extreme case, it shows the law is broken. Future presidents will look at this moment and see a green light to use military force whenever they want. We also have to look at the impeachment angle. This refusal to answer questions feeds directly into the impeachment inquiry. The articles of impeachment regarding abuse of power and international aggression are strengthened by this stonewalling. Obstruction of Congress is a classic impeachment charge. By refusing to answer questions and by attacking the oversight process, the president is handing his opponents the evidence they need. The House will likely use this Senate vote as proof that the president is out of control. Finally, the outlook for the situation in Venezuela is grim. Without a clear plan, without congressional buy-in, and without the support of the local opposition, the occupation is likely to fail. The power vacuum will be filled by the armed groups mentioned earlier. America will be blamed for the chaos. The president will likely blame Congress for undermining him, setting up a stab-in-the-back narrative. This will further polarize the American public. We are looking at a future of increased domestic instability caused by foreign adventurism. The Senate explosion was just the beginning of a long, difficult struggle over who actually runs American government.